Joining us to talk us, we're going to go across to Nidhi Razdan in just a couple of minutes and keep taking you to the latest that's actually playing itself out there in Israel. We also have with us Professor A.K. Pasa, Director, Gulf Studies Program at the JNU. K.C. Singh is with us, former diplomat. Dr. Wail Hassan Awad is with us, writer, political analyst, all of whom have been very closely looking at and monitoring what's been happening in the Middle East and also India-Israeli relations. But before I come to any of you, I just want to very quickly go across to my colleague Nidhi Razdan, who's there in Israel. We're still trying to get through to her. I'll try and establish her in just a minute or two. But K.C. Singh, just take us through the significance of this particular moment. And you're going to hear, there are critics already saying that is India abandoning the Palestinians and so on and so forth. But Israel, over a period of time, it was quiet first, and now it's out in the open. The fact that Israel and India have now become really key strategic allies, particularly in defense areas and as a source of defense supplies, but also potentially in other high-tech areas. Take us through your interpretation of what's happening today.
Look, you see, it began 25 years ago, and it happened after the Cold War ended, Gulf War was over, Soviet Union was gone, US was the dominant power. And the Madrid Peace Conference had started, where the Israelis were sitting across the table from Palestinians, Jordanians, Lebanese, talking to them. The Americans told us that for the Washington portion of the political dialogue, India would not even get invited because we did not have diplomatic relations with all the countries. So you had the Palestinians talking to Israelis, and we, the biggest slogan mongers of all times in support of the Palestinians, were told to, take a hike, because we didn't have relations. So that was a US way of sending a signal, and that's why it was almost overnight. Narasimha Rao tweaked the foreign policy, and I was then Director WANA, actually dealing with Israel. And I got my good friend Hardeep Puri, who was sitting in the Foreign Secretary's office, to say we need a cabinet note today. And within 2 days it was approved. But then before announcing, like Mr. Modi's done with the President of Palestine, Yasser Arafat was invited to Delhi. He was put in the picture, and then it was announced that we are establishing relations. But since then, don't forget, it's not been all behind behind wraps. Ariel Sharon, the Israeli Prime Minister, was here at the invitation of Prime Minister Vajpayee. We've had a presidents go up and down. President Mukherjee has been there. Only thing missing was the Prime Minister going there and not going to Ramallah.
And a bit of the atmospheric. K.C. Singh, I want to just read out to you. I just want to read out to you what the Haaretz actually had to say today in a really interesting editorial. So they've written out here, Israel has long complained that India treats it like a mistress, glad to partake of its defense and technology charms, but a little embarrassed about the whole thing and unwilling to make the relationship too public. With Narendra Modi's visit to Israel, the first ever by a sitting Indian Prime Minister, it will be like the two countries arriving hand in hand to opening night of the opera season, lit by a barrage of flashing cameras. How do you interpret that? Is that pretty much what's happening right now? Hand in hand, quite literally, you can see there Netanyahu and Narendra Modi.
Yeah, I think that's how Israel is. That's how Israel would see it. It's obviously having a much greater impact in Israel than it has at this end, because for us it's an incremental growth. But I think they felt that there was some illegitimacy, something illicit about it, and India was not willing to acknowledge. And for them, that could only be removed if the Indian Prime Minister came, not the Indian President, not the Indian ministers, not their Prime Minister coming. But it's understandable, because our country which is isolated, alienated, with so many enemies, it needed hand-holding.
All right. Let me go across to Nidhi Razdan before I come to our other guests and try and analyze and understand this. And we'll also look at some of the reaction back home. But Nidhi, there in Israel, what's the sort of reaction? If you're picking it up from here, it seems that there's a lot of excitement. It seems to be a lot of coverage there in the Israeli press as well. Lots of editorial, lots of front page articles talking about this. And it seems to be a big deal there in Israel.
It is, and you do get a sense clearly from the Israeli Prime Minister's statements over the last few days that this is a visit that they're attaching a lot of importance to. And, the two PMs are going to speak again in about an hour from now. And they've really set the tone with that ceremonial welcome for Prime Minister Modi. But I think it's also interesting, Vikram, that the Prime Minister chose to come here to Jerusalem, to Tel Aviv at this time. Because, there's been a build-up to this. The Prime Minister making sure that, India was not going to alienate its other Middle Eastern friends and the Arab countries in particular. So we've seen Mr. Modi engage with the UAE, with Saudi Arabia, Iran, and all these other countries in the sort of build-up to ultimately coming to Israel. In fact, it was expected that Mr. Modi would come here way back in 2015. But it seems to have been thought out that it was better at that time for President Mukherjee to come here first and then for Mr. Modi to come later. So that is why I think that's also been smart in a sense, because you really don't hear any sort of whispers of protest from that side. Also, importantly, the PM is not going to Ramallah. He's not going to the seat of the Palestinian Authority, which is something President Pranab Mukherjee did. 3 Indian external affairs ministers did the same before that. So this time it's very clear that India is looking to dehyphenate this relationship. And, the Indian ambassador also telling us that India has explained to the Palestinians that this, we've matured enough to maintain a relationship with both sides. And, Mahmoud Abbas was in Delhi just weeks earlier, just months earlier. And, on yet another visit, his I think, 5th visit in 10 years. So therefore, I think what India is trying to do is really come out of the closet in this relationship with Israel, which in itself, the visit in itself, I think is the headline more than any defense pacts or other pacts that we'll see tomorrow. Vikram.
Right. So, Nidhi, one is the atmospherics of it, talking about it, letting it be clear that India is not going to be ashamed about talking of its relations with Israel. So that's the one part of it. That's the atmospherics. The emotional aspects, like, for example, visiting the Holocaust Memorial, which the Prime Minister has just done. In more concrete terms, defense ties obviously are there. We're hearing about those UAVs. India is already one of the largest buyers of Israeli weaponry. Are we likely to see deals signed in that? Are we likely to see any deals in water and agriculture and all the other areas where the countries want to work more closely together?
Well, actually, even though defense is sort of the cornerstone of this relationship, it's not the big focus of this visit at all. Of course, they're going to talk about security issues, intelligence sharing, terrorism. They're going to talk about, defense and all of that. But in terms of concrete takeaways, I think this particular visit is focusing a lot on what, Israel can do in terms of, development help for India. So the focus is on, for example, the water management technologies that Israel has that can help Indian farmers, their irrigation technology in particular, that can help farmers improve their crop yields, other science and technology innovations. They're looking at that, looking at cyber security as well, pacts that relate to education, a pact on cleaning up the Ganga is also on the cards. So they're really looking at elevating that aspect of the relationship to a strategic partnership, while all the other issues will obviously be discussed and talked about in great detail. I think it's significant that they're trying to widen this relationship to beyond that. Vikram.
All right, Nidhi, thanks a lot for joining us with that perspective from there in Israel. And as all of this is happening, I'm just hearing flashes that a new Israeli flower has been named after the Prime Minister. So lots and lots of symbolism coming in there. Dr. Awad, let me come to you. We heard Nidhi saying India has been at pains to let the Arab world know that it's not that we are breaking our relations with your ties with ours. And the Arab world, in a sense, does know that India has relations with Israel and has had them for the last 25 years. How is this particular visit and the atmospherics around it being seen in the Arab world?
Thank you, Vikram. I think it is a historic visit by a Prime Minister of India, which is giving a political message also across the world and across the Arab world, saying that India has taken a new lines in the history of the relation between Israel and India, and they're cementing this relation because we could see the personalization of the foreign policy by Mr. Modi. Whenever he goes, there's a touch of his own charisma in cementing those relations, especially with a country like Israel, where he feels that the Israeli experiments in fighting terrorism is a good for India. But unfortunately, in the Arab world, it is not seen in those eyes because we do see it for different eyes. No doubt that the Arab world and India have given assurances, and India was the first country to be supporting the Arab cause and the Palestinian cause. In fact, it was the first country who recognized the Palestinian state. Having said that, I wouldn't expect India to be more Arabs than the Arab themselves. So therefore, India have the full sovereignty of doing its own business, because we Arab to be blamed for losing India to Israel. And that's the message I just wanted to say in short.
It's interesting what you say, because we were looking at history, and in the past it's quite often happened that when India really needed support, Israel did come up, and that's something which many people in this country haven't completely forgotten. 71, 60, there were lots of issues, lots of times when India was really pressed against the wall, and that time with no relations, no diplomatic relations, Israel did step forward. KC Singh, would you tend to agree with that? And is that where some of the foundations for that relationship comes up?
No, that is true, but I think the problem is not so much with the Arab world. The problem will be with Iran and the Shia Crescent, because they are the ones who are pitted against Israel at the moment, led by Iran from the front. Also, you would remember that leak which took place, where it was alleged that President Trump let the source be known to the Russians when the Russian foreign minister came, was Israeli intelligence, probably about ISIS. So ISIS is one thing on which, you see, traditionally we've had a counterterrorism discussion with Israel, but really our targets were entirely different. For us, they were Pakistan specific, about whom Israel knew very little, and for them it was the Palestinians who were friendly to us. So the overlap was not there. With ISIS, there may be some overlap.
Okay.
But the problem with the Arab, they had a mission in Qatar, and the Arab world itself is divided today, don't forget. You know, Qatar is being literally pilloried by Saudi Arabia, UAE.
Yeah, there
Turks
are lots
are
of
with them,
divisions
Iran
right now
is with
in
them.
the Arab world.
So the whole region isn't.